Our first speaker, who I'd like to introduce, is Jill Mangaliman, who is the Executive Director of Got Green, which is a people of colour-led environmental justice group based in South Seattle. And I'd like to welcome Jill.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. Thank you all for coming out here today. I'm here on behalf of Got Green. I first wanted to say that I'm especially proud of the youth who have led the charge for climate justice, for calling for more powerful legislation that will protect our planet and our people. And again, it's always the youth who are leading the charge, and I thank you for all your work. The Clean Air Rule had the potential to do something significant for our state, for our region. Unfortunately, it fails at climate justice and racial justice. Got Green joined a group called Front and Centered, and in the summer of 2014, developed climate justice criteria that we presented to legislators in Olympia and also nationally. The criteria goes as follows. Equity must be at the center of policies to address climate change, because communities of color and low-income communities are hit first and worst by by climate change, by this calamity that is approaching our planet and is happening now. These policies and implementations approaches must be informed by these communities and have a racial, economic, and environmental analysis. And those communities who are most impacted by climate change must be fully engaged in the policy process and design to ensure equitable outcomes. Unfortunately, the Clean Air Rule was done without that. We had one stakeholder meeting as a coalition, and then there was a hearing in Tumwater. And not once did we see an effort from the Department of Ecology or from the governor's administration to go to those communities, to where the Superfund sites were, where people were suffering from asthma, where people were suffering from wildfires and heat waves or flooding. And so we see this lack of meaningful engagement, one of the major risks of how this policy was constructed. Without the people who are most impacted, how are we to know that these solutions will actually reach them? The next criteria is that these communities, these EJ communities, people of color and low-income communities, must receive net environmental economic benefits. Where in this policy are there reinvestments in these communities? Where in this legislation are there resources for these communities to transition to renewable economy? As we know that as we pass climate policies, harms and the cost burden will be passed on to the most vulnerable. How do we ensure that these policies don't do further harm to already marginalized communities? And so we are calling on the Department of Ecology and the governor to really, do their analysis and tracking and reach out to these communities and ensure that there is a way for these communities to be lifted up. And furthermore, we also see that there's a need for accountability and transparency through public and accessible, culturally appropriate participation and strong enforcement. We know that, for the longest time, there are a lot of companies here in Washington State. How do we ensure that the status quo doesn't continue? How do we ensure that there are reductions of emissions on the ground, and that people who live near those, who live on the fence line of these companies or these highways or these places of high emissions are actually getting relief and also are having better air and having access to this healthier, greener world. And so we want to ensure that, again, the people who have been left out of public process, the people who have been without resources historically, people of color, low-income people, indigenous people, have access to this transition that we are seeing in our economy. And so we ask that this Clean Air Rule becomes stronger, that it directs its investments and directs a priority to reducing emissions at the source in communities of color and low-income communities and historically sites of high pollution. We ask that the Department of Ecology and the governor engage with us meaningfully, like go to where we are and meet with us here in South Seattle, South King County, and in Pierce County, where communities live. And we asked for racial justice and climate justice because we can't pass policies without that. And so we need to ensure that, again, we're not replicating the systems that we are fighting. And so I am here in solidarity with the youth. I'm in solidarity with all of you because I want to see a better world. Thank you.